Hello and welcome to the Headache Doctor podcast, where on this podcast, it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. In today's podcast, we have Dr. Thomas back with us, and we are going to jump into the world of work and how headaches or migraines impact work. We're going to go into statistics. We're going to talk about things that if you're an employer, you're really going to want to listen to this. And so, Dr. Thomas, thank you so much for being on the podcast again.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I always love doing a lot of research, and this was such an interesting topic. Most of our sufferers with migraines, they're hitting between their peak years, so between about 20 to 40, 20 to 50, and those are also your peak work years. So this is actually a really big issue. It affects about 16% of the American workforce, and it was really interesting to do research. And as you said, this is a podcast that's just for about everyone. If you have employees, if you are an employee yourself, even if you just have coworkers with migraine, I think there will be something beneficial for you in here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know of either someone or we directly are working in an office environment, sitting, prolonged sitting. And so, yeah, we'll talk about some practical things, but really just get into the general impact of work. So I'm excited about this conversation. So Dr. Thomas, what do we have? Where should we start?
Yeah, we're going to talk about 3 areas today. These areas are lost productivity, and then increased sick days, and then increased employer costs. So we can just jump right into lost productivity. And I think this one was actually really interesting. So most people, when they think about headaches, I think they just jump automatically to sick days. And it's really interesting to talk about that is actually not really the majority. It's about 89% of lost productivity, lost cost with employers actually comes from something called presenteeism. And that's a new word. That was a new word for me. It's probably a new word for many of our listeners. But essentially what this refers to is being at work. So being present, being paid for your time, but being less productive due to an illness or an accident, an injury, etc. And this is a problem in a number of different ways. So if you show up to work, let's say your arm is broken. We'll just use that as an example. And you show up to work and you probably can't do all of your tasks. So that's one area that presenteeism is a problem, is you physically sometimes can't do everything. You also might not be able to do things at the same speed or level. So obviously a broken arm is not contagious, but if you do come in with some sort of a contagious illness, you can also spread that around, which can be bad. This concept of showing up to work but not being able to work at full capacity is actually what accounts for the majority of loss of productivity with migraine sufferers, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing the number of people that I would say it's very common. Most people that we work with have a migraine presentation. Maybe it's daily headaches or just frequent migraines, and they have tried all the medication, they've tried all the treatments, they can't stop their life, and so they have to just push through. But they say their quality of life has reduced, their ability to function at full capacity, feel like they're productive, have a social life. They get home and they're just exhausted, like they have to, basically go to bed early, they're not present for their families. And so the impact on the work environment, I'm sure, is substantial, as if you have like clear set productivity standards, like maybe they're challenging to meet, or maybe it's just there's this underlying tone of your boss or manager or those you work with, like you're sort of letting them down and they're starting to see it, but you want to be there for them. Everyone's trying to help each other out, but these migraines are getting in the way.
Yeah. And there's a lot with migraine that goes into, you're in pain. It's really hard to focus when you're in pain. You may also be suffering from all the side effects that come with migraines or all of the comorbidities. So stuff like nausea, vomiting, dizziness. It's really hard to work if you're constantly sick, if you are really super dizzy all the time. It's very hard to focus on your job. You may also just be dealing with an increased level of stress. Many of our patients come in and they talk about how much anxiety they have around even if they don't have a migraine, they might be really worried about getting one. And that's extremely distracting. You may always be worried about if you have enough medication in your purse, or your drawer, and that can be very distracting. Studies kind of vary on this one a little bit, but essentially for migraine sufferers specifically, the loss of productivity can be anywhere from 0 to 65% per one study, and then about 50% per another. So there's a pretty severe productivity loss. And I was actually going to ask Dr. Taves to talk about if all of us showed up to work at Novera, but we were working 50% of what our capability would be, talk about the economic impact of that a little bit.
Yeah. If I don't know if we would be viable. We're a small business. And so if employees showed up at 50%, well, one, it changes a lot of things. Specifically in our setting, when someone interacts with us, these are people that, just like you, the listener, have headaches or migraines and are pursuing this type of care because you want to interact with someone who's confident and knows what they're doing and can care for you. And so in our setting, if you walk in and, our front desk has, a migraine and she's just sort of at half capacity and having a hard time functioning, and then, you go to your physical therapist and they're functioning at half capacity, the patient's going to see it. It's going to have a direct impact on the patient, the client, the customer, in any business. Like it's eventually going to trickle down. The culture of our practice would definitely change. Say, for example, maybe you get the work done, but when it comes time to, the break or the meeting or lunch, and you're either out the door, you're on your own, like you don't communicate with anyone, that definitely has an impact on team culture, which makes it a more challenging work environment if you just aren't able to have the capacity to engage with your coworkers and be there for them. So it's going to have a direct impact on revenue, people being able to trust the process, and our capacity to really care and drive the mission forward. And so there's probably some intangible things that, when I say intangible, like they maybe not directly connect to, revenue or things like that, but impact the look and feel of a business, whether it's from someone entering into that business as a customer client or the culture interiorly. And then the, I would imagine, if there is like productivity standards or things like that, it would be over time. There'd probably be like performance reviews and, so I really don't think if there were enough employees, and you said it was about 16% of people or so,
yeah, right at 16% of the American workforce is what we're looking at for migraine and headache sufferers.
Yeah, so 16% of the workforce at 50% capacity. It's substantial, and we hear it all the time. That stat is not surprising, and we have a lot of people that push through and feel like they're functioning at a high level, but it's almost like you forgot what it would look like to function at 100% because you've just always had to be at 50. So, yeah, I don't have any specific this is the exact impact that would have, but that's sort of what goes on in my head.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really good points, and I think this is why this is more of an impact, and it's more subtle. It's harder to measure, and so I think that's why most people don't think about this. But yeah, and we'll talk about sick days in just a second, but there's so many things that go into this that are such a big impact on companies. Like you said, there's loss of productivity. There's, that team dynamic. There's a less good product. There's so many different things that go into being present at work, but not being at your full capacity. And that's why I think this was a really good one to talk about first. And I do think, like I said, about 89% of loss of productivity from migraines comes just from these very intangible or very hard to measure aspects. That being said, you sometimes don't have the capability of showing up to work and working at 50% productivity. I think Novera is not a bad example of this, where I, as a healthcare provider, I can't really be 50% effective. If I truly am ill or something, I probably just need to call off work. And there's many jobs such as emergency response and healthcare and other very high stress, high performance jobs where you do not have the you don't have the option of showing up and not being at full peak. And so sick days are a concern as well, not actually as much. Research is actually pretty lower on this than I thought, that you only take, I think most migraine sufferers, only about 7% of them take monthly sick leave. So it's not as big an issue, but it is still an issue to consider.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very true. I like what you said there about there are certain jobs that if you can't be 100%, you might as well just not show up. And yeah, there's more critical positions, I think, like firefighters, first responders, where you don't want your firefighter showing up like with a headache or a migraine. Yeah. And so that's a really good point. I mean, and so you almost might be doing a disservice if you try to push through. And so taking the sick leave is what a lot of people might be subject to. And that's, and again, we hear that all the time. It might be a couple days a month. It might be, for some, it's even like weekly. We have several patients even working with right now that can't continue in their job or their internship or with their schooling. And not only can they not function at a high level like all the time, but then they have these more debilitating migraines where they basically just have to stay in bed. So yeah, substantial impact as well.
Yeah, and just for some numbers on this. So assuming if even per sick day, so many people do have sick time as a benefit. There are other places where it's either not offered or it's offered as kind of a combination of PTO. That being said, it's costing someone every time you call for work, either it's you or it's your company, someone is paying for that. The average salary in the US is around $63,000 a year. And if you divide that out, so if you say, I did all the math for this, but essentially every time you miss a day of work, it's costing you around $255, which does add up. Like I said, that might not be a cost you directly incur, but that is a cost that someone has to pay, be it you or your employer. Someone's losing a substantial amount of money every time you call off work.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically the employer's loss would be higher, right? With operating costs, and leases and all the background systems that go into play. So if there's not the opportunity to make money because the employee is out, then that's a substantial loss. And so oftentimes the employer has more stake in the game, not emotionally or personally, but as far as like from a monetary perspective, they potentially have more stake in this game of like helping you improve your situation, which a little tangent might be, if you're considering going through our process or just, carving out time to move more throughout your day or needing a standing desk or, hey, I want to implement whatever healthy habit it may be, maybe send this podcast to your employer and say, hey, like, here's the actual impact. And here's these experts talking about how this is having a negative impact on our business and why it needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if all of us, so Novera again, we have receptionists, we have marketing, we have therapists. So if all of us were taking like 1 to 2 days a month off, what would that do to Novera?
Yeah, you'd all be gone. That's for sure.
I'll be fired.
Yeah. It would be tough. It would really be tough. Again, we're a small business. There's corporations. There's that they build this into their systems, and they've got enough of the dollars flowing through that it may not feel like that big of an impact, but I'm sure when you add up the numbers, like it doesn't matter how you scale it, small, large, it's going to have a substantial impact when you look at someone taking 1 to 2 days off just because they're sick. I would say the bigger impact might even be on those individuals, because I as an employer, I wouldn't want my employee to just be like suffering and we're like, okay, when is the next migraine going to hit? And so again, I would want to help them figure that out. So when they are at work, they can be present. And then we're not like worried about them missing another day within the month. And so obviously the bigger impact is on them, because you don't want to use your sick days, PTO days, just to take care of your migraine. And so as an employer, if I see that, I would take steps to try to help them problem solve. So that's not an ongoing thing. But yeah, definitely impactful on the business itself. But I would probably, care more. Well, not probably. I would care more about the employee getting the relief that they need.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And one that kind of is a consideration as well is this really does have a lot of impacts, not just financial, but just on people's confidence, honestly, it impacts people's career choice as well. You might not go into a certain field if you know always have headaches, for example. Maybe you're not going to go into nursing, or you're not going to be that firefighter because you don't have that confidence, and then it impacts your team. It impacts the mood, your stress, just how happy you are even to be at work. There's so many costs that go into that can really have really detrimental effects on not only the migraine sufferer, but the company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every job is important. Everyone has a different passion. Everyone has a different skill set. The thing that transcends all of that and impacts everyone is if you're in pain all day, like, it doesn't really matter. You can't function. You can't do it, or you're at half capacity. And so it's talking about these things are real and tangible, and like, oh yeah, I miss a day and it's worth $250, and that's like real money that's impacting me. But the even greater impact on someone's life is their quality of life, and feeling like I can't get out of this and there's no answers, and like no one's listening, and our healthcare system like doesn't know what to do with me. And come to find out that there's like millions of other people dealing with the same stuff, and you're not alone. And that's why this podcast exists, to encourage you.
Yeah, and to further encourage you, so there are some steps. Primarily, I wanted this podcast just to be the impact. Again, I think it's really understudied sometimes how impactful migraines are to someone's health, to their work ethic, to just everything around work. So primarily, I wanted this to be informational as to how headaches impact work. That being said, I did want to end on a little bit of a more positive note as to things that people can do. So if you are someone, and this especially is really good for employers to be listening. So if you do have team members with migraines, there are a lot of steps you can take. So first one is you can make your environment a lot more migraine friendly. You can make sure the lights aren't glaring. You can make sure standing desks are available. I was just talking about this at lunch. My husband is an engineer and programs at a desk, and I was kind of chewing out their HR. Okay, not chewing out, but I was discussing with their HR. I was like, he really needs a standing desk, and we finally did get him one. So getting your employees standing desks, making sure the lights aren't too bright, providing flexible work hours is huge. So I was just working with someone yesterday that talked about how she's really lucky to have a job where if she needs to sleep all morning with her headache and then show up at noon, that's doable. It's not always doable for some people. So if you were an employer and you can provide flexible work hours to your people, that is huge. Work from home going along from that is also big. Sometimes just your employee cannot tolerate being in that office, whether it's the drive, whether it's the lights, the noise. There's so many things that go into it, but allowing your employees to work from home is another thing that you can still get a really good amount of productivity, and probably more than you're going to get in the office. And then the last one I'll let Dr. Taves talk about, but we are launching a new initiative here at Novera to help people out with this as well.
Yeah, so we, in our mission, which is to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines. And so that's broad, right? Education, empowerment. Largely on this podcast, that's directly tied to what we do here. Education, empowerment of like, hey, we understand you. We understand your problem, and we see people like you every day that get better. Okay, that's empowerment. That's saying like, wow, no one's ever said that. No one's ever spoken these things in a way that they have confidence. Okay, and so education is allowing you to understand your scenario better, move forward with like self-care. Here's a provider I need to see. Here's steps I can take. Here's how I understand the problem. And so we've learned that works really well. People can understand this information, and there's reviews on this podcast of people that just listen to the podcast and it's changed their life. It's dramatically reduced their headache or migraine. And so what we want to do is take this process and the content that we've come up with and apply it to the workplace. And so if you work in a setting or with a company that they are pro-employee and would find this process beneficial, we want you to reach out to us, and we can start with something as simple as like a lunch and learn or interaction with HR, whoever it may be, and start entering into the workplace and seeing how we can help employers, specifically if you're in the Denver area, really anywhere, probably anywhere in Colorado, we'd love especially to have a conversation with you as we can provide in-person, at a capacity at any level. So whether it's just like, hey, we want our employees to understand ergonomics or desk setup or, these red flags when it comes to headaches in the workplace, we'd be happy to set up a lunch and learn, all the way to the point of like entering into an office space and being available for treatments on a weekly basis, something like that. So it's a new program that we're rolling out, and you, the listener, can help us maybe enter into your workplace. So if you're listening to this and this sounds like something that you or your company would be on board with, let us know. You can reach out hello@noveraheadachecenter.com, and we can get in touch with you that way. Our phone number is 719-598-1010, and we'd love to hear from you. And anything else, Dr. Thomas?
No, I think that covers it. I just want to reiterate, we would love to help this not be an issue in the workplace. As I was reading through this, it's always heartbreaking to me to hear stories of people that are not pursuing the career they love, or are getting fired or leaving jobs that they love, not being able to have that confidence. It always breaks my heart. I never want to hear this. I want every single person I work with to be able to fulfill whatever dream they have of working in whatever career. So if this sounds like you, reach out to us. We would love to help you.
Yeah, let's continue this mission in the workplace and allow people to be productive and thrive in their careers. And we'd love your help with that. Another way you can help is just write us a review. Give us a 5-star review on this podcast. Wherever you listen to it, share it. Send it to someone that you know suffers with headaches or migraines and could benefit from it. So here's the idea, guys. We're a little fish in a big pond, and the big pond directly leads to medication and doesn't provide answers. So that's what you all have been dealing with. We're trying to provide clarity and solutions to the real problems that people are dealing with, and we need your help to continue to expand on this process and our mission. And we thank you guys for being weekly listeners. Stay tuned next time as we continue on this journey to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. I'll see you then.